Your peace isn't lost, it's being leased out through unconscious reaction contracts. This audiobook shows you how to reclaim emotional sovereignty and build the cool mind that nothing can shake. How to build a cool mind. Introduction. In today's hyper-connected world, your peace of mind has become collateral damage in an endless barrage of provocations. The day begins with the soft glow of your phone screen, each notification a potential disruption to your inner state. Before your feet touch the floor, you've already absorbed a dozen microaggressions, an urgent work email, a passive-aggressive text, news headlines designed to inflame. Your peace evaporates like morning dew in harsh sunlight. Throughout the day, this pattern intensifies. A colleague's tone in a meeting echoes in your mind for hours. A family member's comment triggers an emotional cascade that colors your entire evening. Traffic snarls, technical glitches, and countless small frustrations seem to conspire against your equilibrium. You find yourself constantly reacting, responding, and recovering, only to begin the cycle again. This perpetual state of reactivity exacts a heavy toll. It's not just the immediate emotional drain of each triggering event. It's the cumulative exhaustion of living in response mode. Your energy disperses in 1,000 directions, leaving you feeling scattered, depleted, and somehow less than who you truly are. You've tried various coping mechanisms, deep breathing, meditation apps, setting boundaries, yet the fundamental problem persists. Your inner peace remains vulnerable to external circumstances. But what if the solution isn't found in controlling your environment or armoring yourself against life's provocations? What if true freedom comes from transforming your relationship with reactivity itself? This book introduces a revolutionary approach to emotional sovereignty through building what I call a cool mind. An internal architecture so solid that external forces lose their power to destabilize your core state. This isn't about emotional suppression or detached observation. It's about developing a sovereign presence that remains undisturbed while fully engaging with life's rich experiences. At the heart of this transformation is the concept of the inner observatory, a mental vantage point from which you can witness your reactions without becoming entangled in them. By the final page, you'll understand a profound truth. Nothing has the inherent power to disturb your peace without your unconscious permission. You'll learn to recognize the invisible reaction contracts you've signed with people and situations, agreements that allow external circumstances to determine your internal state. More importantly, you'll discover how to reclaim your emotional sovereignty in a world that seems designed to trigger you. What becomes possible when you operate from a cool mind? Imagine maintaining clarity in chaos, accessing creativity under pressure, and experiencing deeper connections in relationships because you're no longer hijacked by reactivity. Picture moving through life with an unshakable center of gravity, fully present to each moment without being at the mercy of it. This transformation awaits you, not through techniques or coping mechanisms, but through a fundamental shift in how you relate to life's provocations. Your journey to emotional sovereignty begins now. Chapter 1. The Reaction Contract. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel, heart rate accelerating as a car abruptly cuts into your lane without signaling. Heat rises in your chest, thoughts racing with indignation. How dare they? Don't they know how dangerous that is? The reaction feels automatic, natural, inevitable. But is it really? In this moment of triggered response, you're experiencing the activation of what we'll call a reaction contract. An unconscious agreement you've made that gives external circumstances complete authority over your internal state. These contracts represent the invisible architecture of your reactivity, the pre-written scripts that dictate how you respond to life's provocations. Think of these contracts as actual documents, each bearing your signature at the bottom. Some were inherited from family patterns, unspoken rules like, "In this house we get angry when disrespected," or "We take everything personally." Others were absorbed from cultural messaging that dictates appropriate emotional responses. Good people should be outraged by injustice, or success requires constant vigilance and stress. The most binding contracts are often those you've authored yourself through repeated response patterns. Each time you react the same way to a similar trigger, you're reinforcing these agreements, making them more automatic and seemingly more natural. The driver who cuts you off becomes more than an incident of poor driving. They become an activator of your contract with disrespect, instantly triggering a cascade of physiological and emotional responses. These contracts have effectively installed various emotion landlords in your mental space. People, situations, and even abstract concepts that you've granted unlimited rights to disturb your peace. Your difficult colleague becomes a landlord with 24/7 access to your thoughts. Social media holds a master key to your emotional state. The news cycle has an open lease to your anxiety. Consider how these contracts manifest in different domains of your life. In relationships, you may have signed agreements that make your peace conditional on others' behaviors or opinions. At work, you might have contracts that allow every email marked urgent to override your focus and calm. With social media, you've perhaps agreed to let every notification demand immediate emotional investment. The power of recognizing these contracts lies in understanding that they are agreements, not immutable laws of nature. When you feel that surge of anger in traffic, you're not experiencing an inevitable response. You're witnessing the activation of a contract you didn't know you signed. This awareness represents the first step toward emotional sovereignty. By seeing your reactions as the result of unconscious agreements rather than unavoidable responses, you begin to create space between stimulus and response. The driver who cuts you off hasn't actually been given any real power over your emotional state. You've simply been honoring a contract you never consciously agreed to. What you react to reveals what you've contracted with. Every trigger points to an agreement. Every emotional hijacking highlights a contract that's been activated. The goal isn't to immediately terminate these contracts. That would be like trying to renovate a house without first understanding its current floor plan. Instead, the first step is simply becoming aware of their existence. Your journey toward a cool mind begins with this fundamental shift in perspective. Your reactions aren't happening to you. They're happening through agreements you've made. By recognizing these contracts, you take the first step toward renegotiating terms that better serve your emotional sovereignty. Observe your reactions throughout the day. Notice the moments when your peace seems to be stolen by external circumstances. In each instance, ask yourself, what contract is being activated here? What agreement have I made that gives this situation power over my internal state? This awareness alone begins to loosen the binding power of these unconscious contracts. The traffic incident that opened this chapter now reveals itself not as a simple cause and effect relationship between external event and internal response, but as the activation of several potential contracts, with disrespect, with your sense of safety, with your ideas about how others should behave. By seeing these as agreements rather than inevitabilities, you begin to reclaim your power of choice in how you respond to life's provocations. When that car cuts you off, you're not just reacting to metal and motion. You're responding to deeply embedded agreements about fairness, respect, and personal space. Each honk of the horn, each frustrated gesture activates a web of unconscious contracts you've made about your place in the world and how others should acknowledge it. This recognition transforms road rage from an automatic response into a voluntary engagement with agreements you can choose to uphold or release. Chapter 2. The Trigger Map. You're sitting at your desk when an unexpected email arrives from your supervisor. Opening it, you find detailed critical feedback about a project you thought was well received. Notice what happens in your body first. Perhaps a tightening in your throat, a sudden hollow feeling in your stomach, or heat rising to your face. Watch as your mind races to defend, explain, or justify. Feel the impulse to immediately respond, to prove the assessment wrong, or to share your frustration with colleagues. This moment of being triggered isn't a character flaw or professional weakness. It's a gateway into understanding your emotional terrain. Each person's trigger landscape is as unique as their fingerprint, shaped by experiences, values, and deep-seated beliefs about the world and their place in it. Think of your emotional terrain as a vast, complex map. Some areas are gentle plains where external events roll through without much disturbance. Other regions are highly charged territories where the slightest provocation sets off seismic reactions. These reactive hotspots aren't random. They're meaningful markers pointing to what matters most to you. Your trigger map contains various territories. Perhaps the valley of professional identity, where feedback feels like an assault on your competence. The mountains of social belonging, where exclusion or rejection cuts particularly deep. Or the plains of personal authority, where being dismissed or interrupted ignites immediate resistance. Understanding this terrain requires the art of compassionate cartography, mapping your triggers with curiosity rather than condemnation. When you approach your reactions as a cartographer rather than a critic, each trigger becomes an opportunity for discovery rather than an indication of failure. Consider how your trigger patterns cluster around specific themes. Do you react most strongly to situations involving authority? Does perceived rejection activate your defensive systems? Are you particularly sensitive to unfairness or injustice? These patterns aren't arbitrary. They're signposts pointing to your core values and unmet needs. Your physical responses serve as the compass in this exploration. The racing heart, constricted breathing, or sudden tension are your body's way of marking emotional coordinates. These sensations emerged as survival mechanisms, creating quick responses to perceived threats. While these reactions may have served you well in the past, they might now be limiting your freedom to respond thoughtfully to present circumstances. The process of mapping your trigger terrain reveals something profound. What activates you illuminates you. Your strongest reactions often point to your deepest values and most significant wounds. That flash of anger when someone dismisses your idea. It might highlight how deeply you value being heard and understood. The sting of critical feedback. Perhaps it touches on an underlying belief about your worth being tied to performance. As you explore this internal landscape, you'll begin to recognize familiar paths of reactivity. The criticism that leads to defensiveness, the dismissal that triggers withdrawal, the comparison that sparks inadequacy. These are well-worn routes in your emotional geography, but awareness itself begins to create new possibilities. When you know the terrain, you can navigate it more skillfully. Each trigger contains within it a story about what you believe needs to happen for you to feel safe, valued, or whole. The supervisor's feedback triggers anxiety because somewhere along the way, you learn that perfect performance equals security. The social slight stings because it connects to a deeper narrative about belonging and worth. This mapping process isn't about eliminating triggers. It's about understanding their terrain so thoroughly that you can move through it with greater awareness and choice. Just as a skilled navigator can traverse challenging landscapes with confidence, you can learn to move through triggering situations with more grace and wisdom. Your trigger map is not a liability, it's a powerful tool for self-understanding. Each reactive hotspot marks an opportunity for growth, a chance to examine the beliefs and patterns that shape your experience. Through compassionate cartography, you transform these challenging territories from places of automatic reaction to regions of conscious response. As you explore this inner landscape with curiosity rather than judgment, you begin to see your triggers not as weaknesses to overcome, but as signposts pointing toward deeper truths about your values and needs. The very sensitivities that once felt like barriers become doorways to profound self-discovery, allowing you to navigate life's challenges with increasing wisdom and grace. This mapping process reveals that what you've perceived as flaws in your emotional architecture are actually sophisticated alert systems, each one carrying vital information about what matters most to you. Chapter 3: The Invisible Thread. Think back to the last time a seemingly casual comment struck an unexpectedly deep nerve. A passing remark about your work style, a light-hearted observation about your habits, or an offhand suggestion about your appearance that somehow penetrated far deeper than it logically should have. In that moment, you likely felt the disconnect between the situation's apparent insignificance and the intensity of your emotional response. This disparity between trigger and reaction points to what we call invisible threads, hidden connections that link present moments to past experiences, creating emotional echoes that reverberate far beyond their current context. Like a vast tapestry of experience, each visible interaction connects to countless threads below the surface, weaving through time to touch earlier moments that shaped your emotional patterns. These threads often lead back to formative experiences, particularly those from childhood when your emotional processing systems were still developing. Your brain, in its effort to protect you, catalogs these early experiences and creates lightning-fast associations to help you navigate similar situations in the future. While this system served an essential protective function in your development, it can now create reactions that seem puzzlingly intense or inappropriate to the present moment. Consider how a supervisor's constructive feedback might pull on a thread connected to memories of a parent's high expectations, activating not just the present concern about job performance, but a deeper pattern of seeking approval and fearing disappointment. Or how a partner's distracted response during conversation might tug on threads leading back to earlier experiences of feeling unheard or dismissed, amplifying the emotional impact far beyond the current interaction. Understanding these threads transforms confusing overreactions into comprehensible connections. When you can trace the path from a current trigger to its historical roots, you begin to see your reactions not as character flaws or emotional weakness, but as logical responses to your lived experience. This awareness creates space between stimulus and response, a crucial gap where new choices become possible. The process of uncovering these connections requires a kind of emotional archaeology. Like a skilled archaeologist, you must approach your reactions with patience and curiosity, gently brushing away layers of time to reveal the original imprints beneath. This exploration isn't about assigning blame to past experiences or people, but about understanding the origins of your response patterns so you can respond to present circumstances with greater awareness and choice. Through thread tracing, you begin to recognize how current situations echo past experiences. A colleague's success might activate threads connected to childhood experiences of comparison with siblings. A friend's cancellation might pull on threads of early abandonment or betrayal. These connections aren't always obvious. They often operate below the surface of conscious awareness, influencing your reactions in ways that can feel mysterious or overwhelming. The power of identifying these threads lies not in cutting them. Many are fundamental to who you are, but in becoming aware of their presence and influence. When you can see how past experiences color your present reactions, you gain the ability to respond to what's actually happening now, rather than unconsciously reacting to historical echoes. Present triggers reveal past teachers. Every intense reaction contains information about the experiences and relationships that shaped your emotional landscape. That sharp response to criticism might reflect early lessons about perfection and worth. The deep hurt from perceived rejection might illuminate important stories about belonging and acceptance that were written in your earliest chapters. This understanding doesn't diminish the reality of your present emotions, but it provides crucial context that can help modulate their intensity. When you can recognize that part of your reaction belongs to the past, you can begin to separate historical patterns from present circumstances, responding more appropriately to what's actually occurring rather than what it reminds you of. Through the lens of invisible threads, your emotional responses become not just reactions to be managed, but gateways to deeper self-understanding. Each trigger offers an opportunity to explore the rich tapestry of your experience, to understand how past and present weave together to create your unique emotional patterns, and to begin the gentle work of updating these patterns to better serve your present life. Chapter 4: The Emotional Echo Chamber. Consider how a minor workplace interaction, a terse email, an ambiguous response in a meeting, or a colleague's dismissive tone can hijack your mental space for hours or even days. The initial sting of the moment transforms into a consuming preoccupation that grows larger and louder with each mental replay. What begins as a brief disturbance becomes the soundtrack of your day, drowning out everything else with its persistent echo. This amplification process occurs in what I call the emotional echo chamber, the mental environment where initial reactions create thought patterns that magnify the original disturbance through repetition, elaboration, and reinforcement. Like sound in an echo chamber, emotional reactions bounce off the walls of your mind, returning with increasing distortion and intensity until the original signal becomes almost unrecognizable. The mechanics of this echo chamber are surprisingly consistent. An initial trigger activates an emotional response, which generates thoughts that intensify the emotion, which then produces more thoughts, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of escalation. You replay the scenario with added layers of meaning and emotion. You craft imaginary confrontations where you deliver the perfect response. You project possible future implications, often catastrophic ones. You mine your memory for similar past experiences that seem to confirm your worst interpretations. This mental architecture amplifies reactions through several key mechanisms. Rumination acts like a feedback loop, repeatedly cycling through the same thoughts and emotions until they become deafening. Catastrophizing functions as a distortion pedal, taking small signals and transforming them into overwhelming noise. Personalization serves as a frequency filter that tunes out alternative explanations while amplifying self-referential interpretations. Overgeneralization works as a reverb effect, extending the impact of single events across your entire emotional landscape. The echo chamber gains power through its invisibility. We often don't realize we're in one until we're already overwhelmed by its effects. A fleeting emotion becomes a persistent mood. A single interaction comes to represent a fundamental truth about your life or relationships. The original trigger fades into the background while the amplified distortions dominate your attention. What makes these patterns particularly challenging is that they often masquerade as problem solving or preparation. The mind presents endless replay and elaboration as necessary analysis, promising that if you think about it enough, you'll prevent future occurrences or discover the perfect response. But this promise is illusory. The echo chamber generates heat without light, motion without progress. Yet understanding the echo chamber's mechanics reveals its vulnerability. Reactions don't grow unless you feed them. Each round of amplification requires your participation, even if that participation feels involuntary. This means that recognizing the pattern creates an opportunity to interrupt it before it consumes your mental space. The key to dismantling the echo chamber lies not in trying to silence the initial reaction, which is often neither possible nor desirable, but in noticing how you participate in its amplification. When you catch yourself crafting elaborate responses to imaginary confrontations, you can recognize this as echo chamber activity rather than necessary mental work. When you notice yourself collecting evidence from past experiences to support your current distress, you can identify this as amplification rather than insight. This recognition creates space between the initial trigger and its potential amplification. In this space, you can choose whether to feed the echo or let it naturally fade. You can notice the impulse to replay and elaborate without following it. You can acknowledge the emotional charge without increasing its voltage through mental rehearsal and reinforcement. The echo chamber loses its power when exposed to awareness. Like turning on the lights in a haunted house, seeing the mechanisms of amplification transforms them from invisible forces controlling your experience into noticeable patterns you can choose to engage with or not. This doesn't mean you'll never get caught in amplification cycles, but it does mean you'll recognize them sooner and find your way out more easily. Your reactions will continue to create initial echoes. This is part of being human. But you can stop being the sound engineer who turns up the volume, adds distortion, and extends the reverb until the original signal is lost in an overwhelming wall of noise. Through this awareness, you reclaim your mental space from the echo chamber's amplification cycles, allowing reactions to naturally dissipate rather than escalate into consuming preoccupations. Chapter 5. The Reaction Gap. You already know those rare, illuminating moments when you've caught yourself before reacting, when you've felt the surge of emotion rise but somehow managed to pause before it overtook you. Perhaps it was during a heated meeting when a colleague made a dismissive comment about your project. The familiar rush of defensiveness arose, words of rebuttal forming instantly on your tongue. But something different happened. Instead of launching into an immediate response, you noticed the tightness in your chest, felt the weight of the silence, and chose to take a slow breath first. In that microscopic yet infinite space between provocation and response, you experienced a flash of true freedom, the power to choose rather than simply react. This space, what we'll call the reaction gap, represents the distance between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Think of it as a stage where life's events unfold. On one side stands the stimulus, the trigger, the provocation, the unexpected circumstance. On the other side waits for your potential responses, the words you might speak, the actions you might take, the emotions you might express. Between these 2 points lies your zone of power, the space where choice becomes possible. Under normal conditions, this gap might feel reasonably spacious, You receive feedback and can thoughtfully consider your response. Someone disagrees with you, and you can listen to understand their perspective. But under stress, fatigue, or strong emotion, the gap begins to narrow. The stimulus and response move closer together until they seem to touch, creating the illusion that your reactions are automatic and inevitable. Many believe that immediate, unfiltered responses represent their most authentic self, that taking time to pause somehow makes their reaction less genuine or honest. Yet the opposite is often true. Your instant reactions typically represent your most conditioned patterns, the automated scripts you've developed over years of unconscious repetition. Your truest, most authentic responses often emerge from the space of awareness, when you can access your deeper wisdom rather than your surface programming. The reaction gap isn't fixed. It expands and contracts based on various factors. Stress, hunger, lack of sleep, and emotional intensity all tend to compress this space, while presence, self-awareness, and intentional practice help to widen it. Even in the most triggering situations, the gap always exists, though it may be microscopically small. Your power lies in recognizing and gradually expanding this space. Creating this gap in challenging moments isn't easy. The pull toward immediate reaction can feel overwhelming, especially when dealing with familiar triggers or heightened emotions. But even the smallest pause, a single breath, a moment of noticing, a brief physical gesture, begins to transform your relationship with reactivity. Each time you manage to create even a fraction of space between stimulus and response, you strengthen your capacity for choice. This isn't about suppressing or controlling your reactions. It's about creating enough space to let your deeper wisdom emerge. In that gap, no matter how brief, lives the possibility of responding from your highest self, rather than your most conditioned patterns. The real power of the reaction gap becomes evident in those critical moments when an automatic response would have escalated a situation, damaged a relationship, or compromised your integrity. Each time you find this space, you're not just avoiding a potentially regrettable reaction. You're actively choosing who you want to be in that moment. Your freedom exists in the space before response. This gap, however small, contains the seed of all possibility, the power to transform a moment of provocation into an opportunity for growth, to convert an automatic reaction into a conscious choice. The quality of your life, your relationships, and your impact on the world largely depends on your ability to find and expand this space, especially in those moments when it matters most. The most profound truth about the reaction gap is that it always exists, even if only for a millisecond. Every stimulus, no matter how provocative, must travel through space before becoming a response. Your journey toward a cool mind begins with recognizing this space and gradually learning to inhabit it, even in life's most challenging moments. This gap isn't theoretical. It's as real as the pause between lightning and thunder, as tangible as the moment between stepping off a curb and your foot touching the ground. In your most reactive moments, when you feel utterly powerless against an emotional surge, this space remains, waiting to be discovered, ready to offer you a sanctuary of choice. The challenge isn't creating this space. It's already there. Your task is to awaken to its presence and learn to take refuge in its possibilities. Chapter 6. The Perspective Pivot. Every challenging situation contains multiple layers of truth, each visible only from particular vantage points. When you're caught in a heated argument with your partner, immersed in workplace tension, or wrestling with a personal setback, your immediate perspective naturally focuses on the aspects that trigger your emotional responses. This close-up view, while intense and compelling, often obscures crucial elements of the larger picture. Imagine viewing that same challenging situation from an elevated position, like watching a scene unfold from a balcony high above. From this vantage point, new patterns emerge. The dynamics that seemed personal and targeted now reveal themselves as recurring cycles. The behavior that feels deliberately provocative becomes clearly rooted in the other person's own struggles and limitations. What appeared as an isolated crisis shows itself as one moment in a much longer story of growth and learning. This shift in perspective doesn't require the external situation to change at all. The same circumstances that moments ago provoked intense reactivity can be transformed purely through adjusting your mental position. This is the power of what we call the perspective pivot, the ability to mentally shift your vantage point to access new understanding and possibilities. When viewing a challenging situation from height, you might notice how both parties contribute to maintaining tension, or how current conflicts echo old patterns from completely different relationships. From the vantage point of 5 years in the future, today's crisis may appear as a crucial turning point that led to important growth. Through the eyes of someone who deeply loves you, your struggles become opportunities for developing strength and wisdom. Each perspective reveals different aspects of truth that remain hidden from other viewpoints. The goal isn't to find the one correct perspective, but to develop the flexibility to move between multiple vantage points, allowing each to contribute to a more complete understanding. This mental mobility is one of the core qualities of a cool mind. The practice of perspective rotation involves intentionally cycling through different viewpoints when faced with a triggering situation. You might begin with the factual observer perspective, noting only observable details without emotional interpretation, then shift to view the situation through the other person's value system and life experiences. Move to the future perspective, considering how this moment might appear in retrospect. Finally, access your wisest self's viewpoint, seeking the opportunity within the challenge. When you encounter resistance to shifting perspective, and you will, remember that your initial viewpoint isn't necessarily providing the most accurate or useful information. It's simply offering the most familiar and emotionally compelling story. Breaking free from this single fixed position, even briefly, begins to loosen its grip on your perception and response. This isn't about invalidating your initial reaction or forcing yourself to adopt an artificially positive view. It's about expanding your perceptual range to access more of the truth present in any situation. Each perspective you can access represents another degree of freedom from reactive patterns. The ability to pivot perspective represents one of the most powerful expressions of emotional sovereignty. While you can't always control external circumstances, you maintain complete freedom to shift how you see them. This shift in seeing inevitably transforms your experience, even while everything external remains exactly the same. As you develop this flexibility of perception, you'll find that triggering situations automatically invoke curiosity about additional perspectives, rather than just stimulating reactivity. The question becomes not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What else might I see from a different vantage point?" Remember, what you see depends entirely on where you stand. By consciously choosing and shifting your perceptual position, you reclaim authority over your experience of life's challenges. This is the essence of building a cool mind, not changing what is, but transforming how you see what is. The real power lies not in finding the right perspective, but in developing the ability to move flexibly between multiple viewpoints. allowing each to contribute its unique insights to your understanding. This mental mobility creates a fundamental shift in how you engage with life's provocations. Instead of becoming locked into a single interpretation that triggers automatic reactions, you gain the freedom to explore different angles, each offering fresh clarity and potential responses. Like a photographer who knows that shifting position by just a few feet can transform an ordinary scene into something extraordinary, you'll discover that even subtle shifts in your mental stance can reveal entirely new dimensions of understanding. Chapter 7. The Inner Observatory. Consider the fundamental difference between being caught in an intense emotional storm and observing it from a place of safety. When you're in the midst of strong emotions, they consume your entire field of awareness. Your heart races, thoughts spiral, and the feeling seems to define your whole reality. But there exists another possibility, a vantage point from which you can witness these same intense experiences while maintaining your center of gravity. Picture being transported from the chaos of an overwhelming storm to a peaceful observatory high above the clouds. From this elevated position, the same tempest that threatened to overwhelm you becomes a fascinating display of nature's power. Lightning that seemed dangerous now creates beautiful patterns across the sky. Thunder that felt threatening becomes an impressive demonstration of energy and motion. Nothing about the storm has changed, but your relationship to it has transformed completely. This shift in perspective illustrates the power of what we call the inner observatory, a mental vantage point from which you can witness your experiences without being consumed by them. This observatory represents the core architecture of a cool mind, offering a position of awareness that remains stable even when emotions run high. The inner observatory isn't a physical place but a state of consciousness you can access at any moment. It's the part of you that can notice anger arising without becoming anger, observe anxiety without being overcome by it, and witness emotional reactions while maintaining connection to your deeper self. From this vantage point, you don't lose touch with your feelings. Instead, you gain the ability to experience them more fully without losing yourself in the process. Many misunderstand this witnessing capacity as a form of emotional detachment or dissociation. But true observatory awareness actually enables deeper engagement with life by creating space between you and your automatic reactions. Instead of suppressing emotions or trying to escape them, you develop the ability to feel them completely while maintaining awareness of your larger self. The observatory perspective represents a fundamental shift in identity, from being your reactions to having your reactions while remaining anchored in awareness. This distinction might seem subtle, but it marks the difference between being helplessly tossed around by emotional storms and maintaining your center while weather patterns move through your consciousness. Your inner observatory has unique qualities that distinguish it from ordinary awareness. It offers panoramic vision, allowing you to see both detail and context simultaneously. It provides stability, remaining unmoved by the intensity of what it witnesses. It maintains clarity, unaffected by the fog of emotional reactivity. Most importantly, it gives you access to choice, the ability to respond thoughtfully rather than react automatically. Developing this witness perspective requires regular practice through what we call observatory visits, brief moments throughout your day when you mentally step back and observe your current experience as if from a slight distance. This isn't about escaping your experience, but about expanding your relationship to it. The key insight underlying the inner observatory is that you are fundamentally the awareness in which all experiences arise, rather than any particular experience itself. You are the sky through which all weather moves, not the weather itself. This shift in self-perception forms the foundation for all other aspects of developing a cool mind. The observatory perspective doesn't make you emotionally numb, quite the opposite. It allows you to engage more authentically with life by creating space between stimulus and response. This space enables you to feel your emotions fully while maintaining connection to your deeper wisdom and capacity for choice. Remember, the inner observatory isn't a mental technique or coping mechanism. It's a fundamental quality of consciousness that becomes increasingly available through recognition and practice. Every time you remember to witness rather than simply react, you strengthen this essential capacity for awareness. Just as a physical observatory requires solid construction to withstand storms while enabling clear observation, your inner observatory becomes more stable and accessible through regular use. It becomes a refuge not from life's intensity, but from unnecessary suffering caused by over-identification with passing states. With each moment you spend in this elevated vantage point, you strengthen its foundations and expand its capacity. The more you inhabit this space of awareness, the more naturally you'll find yourself settling into it during life's turbulent moments. Your inner observatory transforms from an occasional shelter into your primary residence, a place where you can fully experience life's winds and weather while remaining grounded in something deeper and more fundamental than any temporary disturbance. Chapter 8. Emotional Spaciousness. Picture the vastness of an ocean, its depths, its power, its endless motion. Now imagine trying to contain that ocean in a teacup. The impossibility of this task mirrors how you might feel when intense emotions arise, threatening to overflow your current capacity to hold them. The natural response is to contract, to try making yourself smaller and tighter, attempting to control what feels uncontrollable. Yet this contraction only intensifies the pressure, creating a cycle of resistance and overwhelm that leaves you feeling constantly on the edge of emotional spillover. What if, instead of trying to compress your emotional experience into an insufficient container, you could expand your internal space to hold whatever arises? This is the essence of emotional spaciousness. The capacity to create room for your full experience without being overwhelmed by it. Like a vast reservoir that can contain both the stillness and storms of water, your awareness can develop the capacity to hold the full range of human emotion without losing its fundamental stability. Your current emotional container has been shaped by years of subtle and overt messages about how to handle feelings. Common phrases like, "pull yourself together," "get a grip," and "don't fall apart," all suggest that the solution to emotional intensity is to contract, to make yourself smaller, to exert more control. This cultural programming leads to a paradoxical relationship with emotions. The more you try to contain them through constriction, the more pressure builds, ultimately leading to either explosive release or chronic suppression. True emotional mastery moves in the opposite direction, toward expansion rather than contraction. When you feel the first signs of emotional intensity instead of tightening around the experience, you can practice creating more space. This isn't about making the emotion smaller, but about making your container larger. The same volume of emotion that overwhelms a constricted space moves naturally and harmlessly through an expanded one. Think of how a harbor contains the ocean's power. It doesn't fight against the waves or try to still them. It provides space for their natural movement while maintaining stable boundaries. Similarly, emotional spaciousness allows you to experience intense feelings without being destabilized by them. The emotion moves through you completely rather than getting stuck or overwhelming your system. This shift from constriction to expansion transforms your relationship with difficult emotions from adversarial to accommodating. Rather than bracing against feelings or trying to control them, you learn to create space for their full expression while maintaining your center. Like a sky that can hold both gentle clouds and raging storms, your awareness expands to accommodate whatever weather patterns emerge in your emotional landscape. The practice of expanding your emotional container begins with recognizing the signs of constriction: tightness in your body, shallow breathing, racing thoughts, the urge to control or escape the experience. These signals indicate that your current container feels insufficient for the intensity of the emotion. Instead of following the habitual impulse to contract, you can choose to expand, physically through deeper breathing and relaxed posture, mentally through widened awareness, and energetically through visualizing more space in your being. As your capacity for emotional spaciousness grows, you'll discover that emotions themselves begin to change their character. What once felt like threatening floods become powerful, but contain movements within your awareness. The same intensity that used to overwhelm you can now move through you naturally, leaving wisdom rather than devastation in its wake. Creating more internal space doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed, but it does transform your relationship with overwhelming experiences. Each time you choose expansion over contraction, you strengthen your container's capacity. Like a muscle that develops through exercise, your ability to hold intense experience grows through practice. The wisdom traditions have long understood what modern psychology now confirms. Our relationship with difficult emotions determines their impact more than their inherent intensity. By developing emotional spaciousness, you create the conditions for a profound shift in how you experience life's inevitable challenges. What you can contain, you can understand. What you can understand, you can transform. This capacity for expansion represents a core quality of the cool mind. It's not about becoming emotionally invulnerable, but rather developing the spaciousness to experience vulnerability without being overwhelmed by it. Your emotions no longer need to be enemies to be conquered or burdens to be endured. They become movements within your vast awareness, each one teaching you more about the depths of your own being. Chapter 9. The Response Architect. Consider the profound weight of inherited reactions, patterns of response passed down through generations, absorbed from your environment, or developed through past experiences. These are like architectural blueprints you never chose, yet they determine how you construct your responses to life's challenges. Each emotional reaction follows these predetermined plans, building the same structures over and over, regardless of whether they truly serve your present needs or align with your deeper values. Now imagine yourself as an architect standing before a blank drafting table with the power to design entirely new responses. This shift from unconscious inheritance to conscious creation represents one of the most powerful transformations available to you. As a response architect, you gain the ability to examine your existing emotional blueprints with fresh eyes and begin drafting alternatives that better reflect who you are becoming rather than who you were conditioned to be. Your current reaction patterns likely contain elements from multiple sources: family dynamics that taught you how to handle conflict, cultural messages about appropriate emotional expression, professional environments that rewarded certain responses while discouraging others. These inherited designs might include automatically withdrawing when feeling vulnerable, responding to criticism with defensive anger, or suppressing your needs to maintain harmony. While these patterns may have served important purposes in the past, they continue to shape your responses long after their original utility has faded. Response architecture begins with careful observation of your existing blueprints. Notice how your current reactions were designed. What are their foundational assumptions? What emotional materials do they use? What hidden rooms and escape routes have been built in? This observation phase requires patience and compassion. These patterns develop for reasons that made sense at the time, even if they no longer serve your highest good. As you examine your reaction blueprints, consider their alignment with your core values. Do your automatic responses reflect your authentic self, or do they perpetuate patterns you've unconsciously inherited? For instance, if you value open communication but your default response to conflict is withdrawal, there's a misalignment between your blueprint and your values that needs redesigning. The process of conscious response design involves multiple elements. First, consider values alignment, ensuring your reactions emerge from your deepest truths rather than surface triggers or inherited patterns. Next, examine future impact. How do your current reaction patterns affect your long-term growth and relationships? Consider resilience enhancement. Do your responses leave you stronger and more capable, or do they drain your emotional resources? Finally, assess relationship effects. How do your reaction patterns influence your connections with others? As response architect, you have the power to draft new blueprints that better serve your present reality. This isn't about creating perfect responses, but about designing alternatives that align more closely with who you're becoming. The revision process starts small, perhaps designing a new response to a single triggering situation, and gradually expands as you gain confidence in your architectural abilities. Your role as response architect doesn't mean every reaction must be consciously designed. Some automatic responses serve you well and don't require renovation. The key is recognizing your power to modify blueprints that no longer fit, to draft new possibilities that better reflect your evolved understanding and aspirations. The practice of response architecture transforms reactive patterns from unconscious habits into intentional expressions of your authentic self. This shift from inherited design to conscious creation represents a fundamental reclamation of your agency in emotional life. As you develop your architectural skills, you'll discover that what once felt like inevitable reactions become opportunities for creative response. Remember, you are the architect, not the building. Your reactions can be consciously designed rather than unconsciously inherited. This understanding opens the door to profound freedom, the ability to create responses that truly reflect your values, serve your growth, and enhance your relationships. The blueprint revision process invites you to select one recurring challenging situation and design an ideal response aligned with your deepest values. What would this response look like if it emerged from your authentic self rather than conditioned patterns? How might it differ from your current automatic reactions? Chapter 10: The Meaning Maker. Your interpretation of events shapes your reality more profoundly than the events themselves. Two individuals can face identical circumstances yet experience entirely different emotional landscapes based solely on the meaning they assign. When a position is eliminated during company restructuring, one person might collapse under the weight of perceived rejection, their mind spinning narratives of personal failure and professional inadequacy. Another might feel an immediate sense of liberation, interpreting the same event as life clearing the path for new opportunities they'd been too comfortable to pursue. This stark contrast illustrates your role as the meaning maker, the architect of significance in your life's experiences. Every event arrives essentially neutral, awaiting your interpretive framework to give it emotional weight and personal significance. A delayed response to your message becomes evidence of disrespect or rejection, only when you assign it that meaning. A challenge at work becomes proof of your inadequacy only when viewed through that particular lens. You've developed these interpretive patterns over time, influenced by early experiences, cultural messages, and repeated thought habits. Perhaps you automatically interpret constructive feedback as criticism, social interactions as evaluations of your worth, or unexpected changes as threats to your security. These meaning-making patterns often operate below conscious awareness, creating emotional responses that feel inevitable and true rather than chosen. Yet these interpretations, no matter how automatic or convincing they feel, remain fundamentally subjective. They are stories you've learned to tell about what events mean, not inherent properties of the events themselves. This distinction contains immense power, because while you cannot always control circumstances, you maintain constant access to your role as meaning maker. Understanding this role requires examining your current meaning-making patterns. Notice how quickly you assign significance to neutral events. A colleague's brief response becomes, "They're angry with me." A missed opportunity becomes, "I'll never succeed." These interpretations feel factual because they align with existing neural pathways, but they represent chosen meanings rather than objective reality. The key to emotional sovereignty lies not in trying to stop making meaning, an impossible task for meaning-seeking humans, but in bringing awareness to how you make meaning. When you recognize yourself as the author of significance rather than its passive recipient, you gain the power to consciously construct alternative interpretations that better serve your growth and well-being. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to find the positive in everything or denying genuine disappointment and loss. Instead, it means expanding your interpretive range beyond habitual patterns. A project setback might still feel challenging, but perhaps it also contains valuable feedback about process improvements. A relationship ending might bring genuine grief while simultaneously opening space for deeper self-discovery. Your interpretive flexibility directly impacts your emotional experience. When you view events through frames of personal inadequacy, hostile intent, or cosmic unfairness, you generate corresponding feelings of shame, defensiveness, or bitter resignation. When you access alternative interpretations, seeing challenges as growth opportunities, conflicts as chances for deeper understanding, or setbacks as necessary course corrections, you create space for curiosity, resilience, and even excitement about what's possible. This shift requires acknowledging how convincing your current interpretations feel. Your mind will present evidence supporting habitual meanings, making them appear as simple facts rather than chosen perspectives. Remember that this seeming truth reflects the strength of neural pathways rather than inherent reality. Just as a well-worn trail appears to be the right way through a forest, simply because many have walked it before, your familiar interpretations feel true because you've thought them repeatedly. Developing your capacity as a conscious meaning maker involves regularly generating multiple possible interpretations for challenging situations. Each time you encounter a triggering event, pause to notice your automatic meaning assignment. Then deliberately construct alternative meanings, observing how each interpretation creates different emotional possibilities. This isn't about finding the right interpretation, but about expanding your range of available meanings. Through this practice, events transform from fixed negative truths into opportunities for interpretive choice. The same circumstances that once seemed to demand certain emotional responses become fluid situations awaiting your conscious meaning, making. This represents perhaps the most direct path to emotional sovereignty, not through controlling events themselves, but through your power to interpret them anew. As you strengthen this interpretive flexibility, you'll notice a profound shift in your relationship with triggering situations. Rather than being pulled into an automatic downward spiral, you pause in a space of possibility. That promotion you didn't get becomes an invitation to reassess your path. The friend who didn't return your call transforms from a personal slight into a canvas for multiple meanings. Your power no longer depends on changing external reality, but flows from your capacity to shape its meaning in ways that serve your growth and peace of mind. Chapter 11. The Emotional Alchemist. Just as ancient alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold through mysterious processes of refinement and transformation, you possess an innate capacity to transform your most disturbing emotional reactions into sources of profound wisdom and growth. This internal alchemy represents one of the most powerful capabilities of the cool mind. The ability to recognize that every emotional disturbance, no matter how uncomfortable or unwanted, contains precious elements waiting to be extracted and refined. Most people relate to difficult emotions in one of two extreme ways. They either attempt to suppress and avoid them, unconsciously believing that certain feelings are too dangerous or overwhelming to fully experience. Or they become completely identified with their reactions, believing that full expression of raw emotion represents emotional authenticity. Both approaches miss the transformative potential contained within emotional disturbance. Emotional alchemy offers a middle path, one that fully honors the validity and importance of your emotional experiences, while refusing to leave them in their crude, reactive state. This alchemical process begins with recognition, coming into direct, honest relationship with whatever you're experiencing without trying to change, justify, or escape it. This requires temporarily setting aside the story about what triggered the emotion to simply acknowledge its presence in your body and awareness. The next stage involves extraction, carefully separating the essential emotion from its reactive expression. Anger, for instance, often carries important messages about boundaries or values being violated, but its reactive expression through blame or aggression obscures this wisdom. By extracting the pure emotion from its conditioned reactions, you begin to access its inherent intelligence. The distillation phase involves identifying the specific teaching or growth opportunity contained within the emotional experience. Every disturbance points to something important, perhaps highlighting an unmet need, revealing an unconscious belief, or indicating an area requiring attention or development. This stage transforms emotional reactions from problems to solve into messages to decode. The final stage, assimilation, involves integrating the distilled wisdom into your broader understanding and way of being. This might involve adjusting boundaries, updating beliefs, or developing new capacities based on what the emotion revealed. Through this process, even the most challenging emotional experiences become catalysts for evolution rather than obstacles to overcome. This alchemical approach doesn't invalidate or minimize emotional experiences. Quite the opposite. It treats them as valuable raw materials deserving careful attention and skilled processing. Just as traditional alchemy required precise conditions and procedures to transform base metals, emotional alchemy requires creating the right internal conditions: presence, curiosity, patience, and trust in the transformative process. The true power of emotional alchemy reveals itself when you begin approaching emotional disturbances with genuine curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of bracing against difficult feelings or trying to quickly resolve them, you learn to ask, what elements of gold exist within this lead? What wisdom lies waiting to be extracted from this discomfort? What aspects of myself is this disturbance inviting me to develop or heal? Through consistent practice, you discover that your most triggering experiences often contain your most important teachings. The colleague who pushes your buttons may be highlighting an unowned aspect of yourself. The situation that repeatedly frustrates you might be pointing to a needed change you've been avoiding. The relationship dynamic that triggers intense reactions could be illuminating old wounds ready for healing. This alchemical perspective fundamentally transforms your relationship with emotional intensity. Rather than seeing strong reactions as problems or failures of emotional mastery, you recognize them as concentrated opportunities for insight and growth. The very experiences you once sought to avoid become valuable opportunities for transformation, each disturbance containing hidden gold waiting to be revealed through your patient, skilled attention. The capacity for emotional alchemy exists within you already. It simply requires learning to create the right conditions and apply the appropriate processes. When you approach your emotional life as an alchemist, rather than a victim or critic, you develop an entirely new relationship with your internal experience. You begin to welcome rather than fear emotional intensity, knowing that within each disturbance lies an opportunity for profound transformation. Your emotions become allies in your evolution rather than enemies to be conquered or controlled. Each surge of anger, wave of sadness, or flash of fear arrives as raw material waiting to be transformed through your awakened attention. Like an ancient alchemist in their laboratory, you stand ready at your inner workbench, equipped with the tools of awareness and acceptance, prepared to extract wisdom from even your most challenging experiences. Chapter 12: The Inner Council. When facing difficult decisions, you've likely experienced the internal cacophony of competing voices vying for attention. One part urges caution while another demands immediate action. The rational mind presents logical arguments, while emotions pull in another direction entirely. This inner conflict can leave you frozen in uncertainty, questioning which aspect of yourself to trust. This fragmentation isn't a flaw in your decision-making process. It's a sign that you're accessing different dimensions of your wisdom. Each voice represents a valuable perspective, but in moments of stress or reactivity, these aspects often become disconnected from each other, creating internal discord rather than harmony. Think of your inner wisdom as a vast symphony orchestra. Each section, strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, contributes its unique voice to create something far more powerful than any instrument could achieve alone. Similarly, your wisdom expresses itself through multiple channels: intuition, logic, emotion, experience, and foresight. The key isn't to silence any section, but to conduct them into harmonic collaboration. This is where the concept of the inner council becomes transformative. Rather than struggling with abstract competing thoughts, you can personify these wisdom aspects into distinct council members, each offering their unique perspective. Your counsel might include your future self, who sees beyond immediate gratification to long-term consequences, your inner sage, who accesses timeless wisdom and universal principles, your compassionate witness, who offers unconditional acceptance without judgment, your protective guardian, who identifies potential risks and boundaries, and your intuitive guide, who perceives patterns and possibilities beyond logical analysis. These council members aren't imaginary friends or external entities. They're personified aspects of your own multidimensional intelligence. Under normal circumstances, these aspects work together seamlessly. But under stress, they can become fragmented, with one voice drowning out the others or different aspects pulling you in opposing directions. The power of the inner council lies in its ability to restore integration. When you bring a challenging situation before your council, you create space to hear from each aspect of your wisdom deliberately, rather than being torn apart by their competing demands. This process transforms internal conflict into constructive dialogue. Many believe that a unified mind means having a single, clear perspective. However, true unity comes not from eliminating diversity, but from integrating multiple viewpoints into a more complete understanding. Just as biodiversity creates resilient ecosystems, cognitive diversity, when properly orchestrated, leads to more nuanced and effective responses to life's challenges. To access this deeper wisdom, you must first acknowledge and respect each council member's unique contribution. Your future self might highlight long-term implications you're currently overlooking. Your inner sage might remind you of fundamental principles that apply to your situation. Your compassionate witness might help you recognize where you're being unnecessarily harsh with yourself. Your protective guardian might identify important boundaries that need maintaining. Your intuitive guide might reveal subtle patterns or opportunities hidden from logical analysis. Learning to convene your inner council takes practice. Initially, you might find some voices louder than others, or notice certain aspects are harder to access. This is natural. You've likely developed habits of privileging certain types of wisdom while dismissing others. The key is to cultivate relationships with all council members, especially those you tend to ignore. When bringing a situation before your council, create mental space for each member to speak without interruption. Notice the different qualities of wisdom they offer. Some might communicate through words, others through feelings, images, or physical sensations. Pay attention to how their perspectives complement each other, creating a fuller picture than any single viewpoint could provide. This process transforms decision-making from an exercise in self-doubt into an enriching consultation with your full spectrum of wisdom. Rather than being paralyzed by competing internal voices, you learn to orchestrate them into a harmonious collaboration that honors all aspects of your intelligence. Through regular council meetings, you'll develop greater trust in your inner wisdom. You'll recognize that certainty doesn't come from silencing dissenting voices, but from allowing all aspects of your intelligence to contribute their unique insights. This integration creates responses that are both wiser and more aligned with your whole self. The greatest power of the inner council lies not in providing instant answers, but in deepening your relationship with your own multifaceted wisdom. As you learn to access and integrate these various aspects of intelligence, you'll find yourself navigating life's challenges with greater clarity, confidence, and inner harmony. Chapter 13. Digital Disturbance. You wake up each morning to an avalanche of information waiting to hijack your peace. Before your feet touch the floor, dozens of notifications compete for your attention. Work emails marked urgent, social media updates triggering comparison, news alerts stoking anxiety, and messages demanding immediate response. This digital deluge doesn't just request your attention, it commands your emotional state, pulling you into reactivity before you've even begun your day. The modern challenge of maintaining emotional sovereignty has evolved far beyond what previous generations faced. Today's digital landscape is intentionally engineered to capture and manipulate your attention through sophisticated psychological triggers. Social media algorithms learn your personal trigger patterns and serve precisely calibrated content to provoke engagement through outrage, anxiety, or desire. News feeds leverage your natural negativity bias, while messaging platforms exploit your social instincts with read receipts and typing indicators that create artificial urgency. This isn't random technological evolution, it's deliberate design. Every notification, every feed refresh, every like button operates on the same principle as a slot machine, delivering intermittent rewards that keep you checking, scrolling, and engaging even when it disturbs your peace. The digital world has essentially become a vast triggering machine, fine-tuned to activate your reactive patterns for the profit of attention merchants. What makes digital disturbance particularly challenging is its unique characteristics. Unlike traditional provocations that come and go, digital triggers are relentless, available 24/7 without natural breaks for recovery. They're multiplicative. Dozens of potential triggers can arrive simultaneously through different channels. They're personalized. Algorithms track your engagement patterns to serve increasingly effective provocations. And perhaps most importantly, they're disembodied, bypassing many of your natural self-regulation mechanisms by engaging you through screens rather than direct human contact. This creates an unprecedented challenge for emotional sovereignty, the same connectivity that offers extraordinary opportunities for learning, connection, and growth also threatens to keep you perpetually reactive, constantly processing more inputs than your nervous system evolved to handle. The result is a state of continuous low-grade activation that makes it increasingly difficult to access the clarity and spaciousness of a cool mind. Yet complete digital withdrawal isn't the answer. The solution lies in developing digital sovereignty, the capacity to engage with technology from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. This means recognizing that while you can't control the flood of digital triggers, you can control your relationship to them. Digital sovereignty begins with understanding that your attention is the most valuable commodity in the modern economy. Every notification, update, and alert represents an attempt to capture this precious resource. By becoming aware of these dynamics, you can start to make more conscious choices about when, how, and why you engage with potentially triggering digital spaces. This doesn't mean implementing rigid restrictions that create FOMO or isolation. Instead, it means establishing clear boundaries that protect your internal space while allowing for meaningful digital engagement. This might involve creating specific time windows for checking reactive platforms, establishing tech-free zones in your home or schedule, or developing pre-engagement practices that strengthen your center before entering potentially triggering digital spaces. The goal isn't to achieve perfect digital detachment. It's to maintain your sovereign presence even while navigating necessary digital engagement. This requires recognizing that each interaction with your devices represents a choice point, an opportunity to engage consciously or to be unconsciously pulled into reaction. The key insight is that digital environments aren't inherently destabilizing. They become destabilizing when we engage with them from a place of unconscious reactivity. By bringing awareness to your digital patterns and establishing conscious boundaries, you can maintain your center even in the midst of the digital hurricane. This is perhaps the most crucial frontier for developing a cool mind in modern life. As technology becomes increasingly sophisticated at triggering reactions, your capacity for digital sovereignty, maintaining conscious choice about your engagement, becomes essential for emotional freedom. Remember, what captures your attention captures your experience. In a world engineered to hijack your awareness, maintaining sovereignty over where you place your attention becomes the foundation of maintaining sovereignty over your internal state. Chapter 14. Relationship Reactivity. In close relationships, our deepest desires for connection often collide with our most intense triggers. A casual comment from your partner about household tasks awakens memories of feeling unseen or unappreciated. A parent's well-meaning advice activates old patterns of perceived judgment. A friend's success stirs complicated feelings of comparison and inadequacy. These moments transform what could be opportunities for intimacy into painful exchanges driven by unconscious patterns. The very relationships that matter most to us become fertile ground for our most challenging reactions. This isn't coincidental. It reflects a profound truth about human connection. Those closest to us have unique access to our core vulnerabilities precisely because we've given them our trust, opened our hearts, and allowed ourselves to need them. Our deepest attachments naturally engage our most sensitive triggers. Think of these relationship dynamics as intricate dances, where each partner knows their steps by heart, though neither consciously chose the choreography. One person moves forward with criticism, the other steps back in withdrawal. One advances with control, the other spins away in rebellion. One reaches for connection, the other turns aside in self-protection. These patterns become so familiar that they feel inevitable, yet they're learned responses that can be unlearned. Relationships serve as mirrors, reflecting back aspects of ourselves we might never see in isolation. When someone's behavior triggers an intense reaction, that reaction often reveals more about our own unresolved wounds, unfulfilled needs, or disowned qualities than about the other person's actions. This mirroring effect can be uncomfortable, which explains why we often blame others for making us feel certain ways, rather than examining what our reactions might be showing us about ourselves. These triggering patterns frequently trace back to our earliest experiences of attachment and connection. The way we learned to relate to important others in childhood created templates that unconsciously influence our adult relationships. This explains why logical understanding alone rarely transforms these reactions. They're held in the body and emotional memory, requiring a deeper level of awareness and integration to shift. Many people believe that achieving a cool mind means becoming emotionally detached or maintaining rigid boundaries in relationships. However, true emotional sovereignty allows for deeper intimacy, precisely because we're no longer defending against our triggers, but understanding them as opportunities for growth and healing. When we can stay present with our reactions without being consumed by them, we create space for authentic connection. The key lies in recognizing that relationship triggers offer invaluable information about our own growth edges. Each difficult interaction illuminates where we still carry wounds, where we've developed protective patterns that no longer serve us, and where we have opportunities to expand our capacity for love and understanding. By viewing triggers as teachers rather than enemies, we transform what could be barriers into bridges. This transformation requires moving beyond the simple recognition of patterns into active engagement with new possibilities. Each triggering moment presents a choice point. We can either react from our old programming or pause to consider what might be trying to emerge in this relationship. Are we being invited to develop greater compassion, to establish healthy boundaries, to express needs we've been afraid to voice, to release outdated beliefs about ourselves or others? The most profound shift occurs when we begin to welcome rather than resist these triggering interactions, understanding that they arise not to punish us, but to show us where healing and growth are possible. Our closest relationships naturally activate our deepest material precisely because these connections provide the safety and intimacy required for genuine transformation. This doesn't mean accepting hurtful behavior or suppressing legitimate grievances. Instead, it means developing the capacity to distinguish between present moment reality and triggered reactions based on past experiences. When we can hold this awareness, we create space for new choices in familiar situations. Our relationships become laboratories for practicing presence, compassion, and conscious response rather than automatic reaction. Each triggering interaction offers an opportunity to choose differently, to interrupt old patterns, and to create new possibilities for connection. This practice requires courage, as it means staying engaged during uncomfortable moments rather than withdrawing into familiar defenses. The quality of our relationships directly reflects our willingness to work with, rather than against our triggers. As we develop this capacity, we discover that the very interactions that once disturbed our peace become doorways to deeper understanding, both of ourselves and others. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but each moment we choose awareness over reactivity builds our capacity for authentic connection. Through this lens, relationship triggers become valued messengers rather than unwanted disturbances. They point us toward our growing edges, reveal where we still need healing, and illuminate the paths to deeper intimacy. By embracing rather than avoiding these challenges, we create the conditions for genuine transformation in our relationships and ourselves. Chapter 15: Workplace Wisdom. Your professional life presents a unique laboratory for emotional sovereignty. In workplace environments, the stakes feel particularly high. Your livelihood, reputation, and career trajectory seem to hang in the balance of each interaction and decision. This amplifies the challenge of maintaining inner calm while navigating critical feedback, team dynamics, shifting priorities, and performance pressures. The modern workplace often sends mixed messages about emotional regulation. On one hand, showing stress is normalized as a sign of commitment and investment in outcomes. If you're not stressed, you don't care enough, becomes an unspoken mantra. Yet paradoxically, those who consistently maintain perspective under pressure, who can engage fully without becoming emotionally hijacked, tend to advance further and have greater impact. This apparent contradiction reveals an essential truth. Genuine professional excellence requires emotional sovereignty. When you can maintain inner calm while staying fully engaged, you access deeper resources of wisdom, creativity, and relational intelligence. Your decisions improve in quality because they arise from clarity rather than reactivity. Your relationships strengthen because you can address conflicts without creating adversaries. Your leadership presence grows because others sense they can count on your steady hand regardless of circumstances. Consider how professional triggers often connect to core identity concerns. Criticism of your work feels like an assault on your competence. Being passed over for an opportunity threatens your sense of recognition and value. Unexpected changes challenge your need for security and control. Understanding these deeper connections explains why certain workplace situations provoke reactions that seem disproportionate on the surface. The foundations of a professional cool mind begin with recognizing that while you can't control all workplace circumstances, you can develop sovereignty over your response to them. This means distinguishing between situations that genuinely require attention and those your mind magnifies through reactive patterns. It means maintaining perspective about the true stakes of any given moment, rather than catastrophizing potential outcomes. In practice, this might mean receiving critical feedback, while maintaining the capacity to extract valuable insights rather than defending against perceived attacks. Navigating team conflicts by addressing substantive issues without turning colleagues into adversaries. Processing disappointments by focusing on growth opportunities rather than self-judgment. Adapting to change by maintaining flexible responsiveness rather than rigid resistance. Developing these capacities requires recognizing that emotional reactivity doesn't demonstrate appropriate professional investment. It actually diminishes your effectiveness. True commitment manifests as the ability to stay purposefully engaged while maintaining inner calm. This allows you to access your full range of capabilities rather than operating from a triggered state. Your professional cool mind serves as a distinctive advantage, enabling you to make decisions from clarity rather than anxiety, build relationships through understanding rather than defensiveness, lead through steady presence rather than volatile reactivity, navigate complexity with flexible wisdom rather than rigid reactions. The workplace provides constant opportunities to practice emotional sovereignty. Each challenging interaction, unexpected setback, or intense pressure becomes an invitation to strengthen your professional cool mind. Rather than seeing these moments as threats to defend against, you can approach them as opportunities to demonstrate distinctive capability. The true measure of professional maturity isn't the absence of challenging emotions, but rather your capacity to maintain perspective while experiencing them. This doesn't mean suppressing natural responses or pretending difficulties don't affect you. Instead, it means developing the ability to feel fully while staying anchored in your deeper wisdom. Your greatest professional asset isn't technical knowledge or specific skills, though these matter, but rather your capacity to maintain sovereignty amid pressure. This allows you to access your capabilities precisely when they're most needed, rather than being hijacked by reactive patterns. Consider that workplace triggers provide valuable information about areas for growth, rather than evidence of professional inadequacy. Each reactive moment points to an opportunity for developing greater emotional sovereignty. As you strengthen this capacity, you naturally enhance your effectiveness across all aspects of professional life. The path to professional excellence runs through emotional sovereignty. By cultivating your cool mind at work, you develop a distinctive presence that enhances both your impact and your well-being. This represents not just personal growth, but professional wisdom of the highest order. Chapter 16. The Calm Body. Your body serves as the first responder to emotional disturbance, initiating a cascade of physiological changes before your conscious mind even registers the trigger. The heart accelerates, breathing becomes shallow and rapid, muscles tense in preparation for action. The throat constricts, and the stomach churns with uncomfortable sensation. These physical manifestations of reactivity represent your body's ancient wisdom, evolutionary responses designed to protect you from threat. Yet in our modern world, these same protective mechanisms often perpetuate cycles of unnecessary disturbance. Understanding the profound connection between physical state and emotional experience opens new pathways to sovereignty. Your body isn't simply a passive vessel for emotional experience. It actively shapes how you feel, think, and respond to life's challenges. While mental strategies certainly matter, true emotional sovereignty must include the wisdom and cooperation of your physical form. Think of your body as an emotional instrument, constantly playing the music of your inner experience. Just as a violin must be properly tuned to produce harmonious sound, your physical form requires conscious attention and calibration to support emotional well-being. When this instrument becomes chronically tensed through repeated stress responses, it begins to play discordant notes of anxiety, irritation, and reactivity as its default melody. The physical patterns of reactivity become deeply grooved through repetition. Shoulders chronically raised toward the ears signal perpetual preparation for threat. A collapsed chest reflects resignation and protective withdrawal. Shallow breathing maintains activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Facial tension creates a feedback loop that reinforces emotional disturbance. These habitual postures aren't simply responses to emotional states. They actively maintain and amplify reactivity. Modern culture has normalized these physical manifestations of chronic stress. We accept tension headaches, digestive issues, and muscular pain as inevitable byproducts of daily life, rather than recognizing them as signals that our emotional instrument needs returning. The common instruction to push through discomfort further disconnects us from our body's wisdom. Yet your physical form holds tremendous intelligence about your emotional state, often recognizing disturbance before your conscious mind acknowledges it. Learning to read and respond to these bodily signals creates a direct path to emotional sovereignty that bypasses the limitations of purely cognitive approaches. Consider how a simple shift in physical state can dramatically alter your emotional experience. Taking several deep breaths into your belly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, creating physiological conditions that support calm presence rather than reactivity. Consciously releasing raised shoulders helps discharge accumulated tension that maintains vigilance. Softening the muscles around your eyes and jaw interrupts the facial feedback loop that amplifies difficult emotions. These somatic practices become particularly crucial during intense emotional experiences when cognitive strategies prove insufficient. While your mind may spiral into reactivity, your body offers concrete tools for returning to center. Physical grounding through the feet provides immediate anchoring when mentally overwhelmed. Conscious breathing creates space around emotional intensity. Intentional muscle relaxation helps discharge the charge of activation. Developing awareness of your physical patterns requires patience and practice. Notice where you habitually hold tension. Common areas include the jaw, throat, shoulders, chest, and belly. Pay attention to how your posture shifts under stress. Observe your breathing patterns throughout the day. This body scanning practice builds the foundation for conscious physical response to emotional triggers. The integration of physical practices with emotional sovereignty isn't about controlling or suppressing bodily responses. Rather, it's about developing a cooperative relationship with your physical form, allowing its wisdom to support rather than undermine your capacity for centered presence. Your body becomes an ally in maintaining sovereignty, rather than an unconscious amplifier of reactivity. Through consistent attention to physical patterns and dedicated practice of somatic techniques, you can gradually retune your emotional instrument to play more harmonious melodies. This doesn't mean you'll never experience physical activation. That would deny your body's natural protective wisdom. Instead, you develop the capacity to recognize and modulate physiological responses rather than being overtaken by them. Your body speaks profound truths about your emotional state, often revealing what your mind works hard to deny or rationalize. Learning to listen to and work with these physical messages provides essential support for maintaining sovereignty, particularly during challenging moments when cognitive understanding alone proves insufficient. The development of a truly cool mind must include the wisdom of your physical form. Chapter 17. The Undisturbed Self. From your undisturbed depths, you can witness the storms of life without becoming them. This essential truth becomes clear when you observe the ocean. While surface waves crash and churn with each passing storm, the profound depths remain perpetually calm, unmoved by the turbulence above. Your consciousness operates similarly. Beneath the reactive thoughts, emotions, and sensations that seem to define your experience lies an unchanging awareness, a core identity that remains peaceful regardless of circumstance. This undisturbed self isn't a theoretical construct or spiritual ideal. It's your most fundamental nature, accessible whenever you shift attention from the content of experience to the awareness in which all experience occurs. While most people exclusively identify with their reactive self, the ever-changing flow of thoughts, feelings, memories, and sensations, there exists a deeper dimension of identity that witnesses these phenomena without becoming entangled in them. You've likely experienced glimpses of this undisturbed nature, even if you didn't recognize them as such. Moments of unexpected peace during difficulty, experiences of timeless presence during full engagement, or instances of witnessing your own reactions as if from a slight distance. These aren't anomalies but windows into your essential nature, the awareness that remains constant while all else changes. When you exclusively identify with the reactive self, every emotional disturbance feels like a total reality. A wave of anger becomes, "I am angry." Anxiety becomes, "I am anxious," rather than recognizing these as temporary states arising within your broader awareness. This misidentification with passing phenomena creates unnecessary suffering and prevents access to your natural stability. Through the practice of depth dropping, you can learn to shift attention from surface reactivity to deeper stillness, particularly during challenging situations. This isn't about escaping or suppressing experience, but rather expanding your identity to include both the changing waves of experience and the unchanging awareness in which they arise. Begin by noticing the physical anchors of your undisturbed nature, the subtle sense of presence behind your thoughts, the space in which sensations arise, the awareness that remains even when thinking stops. In difficult moments, rather than struggling with reactivity, practice dropping attention beneath the turbulent surface to contact this deeper dimension of being. This recognition transforms your relationship with triggering experiences. Instead of total immersion in reactivity, you maintain connection to a more essential sense of self that remains untouched by passing states. From this foundation, you can fully engage with life's challenges while remaining grounded in unshakable peace. Your undisturbed nature isn't something to achieve or create. It's already present as your most basic identity. The practice involves recognizing what's already here, shifting from exclusive identification with the changing content of experience to including the unchanging awareness in which all experience occurs. This realization represents the deepest foundation of the cool mind. When you know yourself as the ocean rather than the waves, no disturbance can truly disturb you. Your reactions may still arise, but they no longer define the totality of who you are. You are the awareness in which all experience arises, the peace that requires no peace, the stability that needs no stabilizing. This truth becomes most powerful during intense emotional experiences. When strong reactions arise, rather than fighting them or becoming consumed by them, you can recognize them as waves on the surface while maintaining connection to your depths. This doesn't diminish the intensity of experience, but transforms your relationship to it, allowing full engagement without loss of center. Life will continue presenting challenges. Relationships will trigger reactions. Work will demand responses. But when you're anchored in your undisturbed nature, these surface movements no longer threaten your essential peace. You can navigate the storms of life from the depths of your being, rather than being tossed about on the waves of reactivity. Chapter 18. Beyond Non-Reactivity. Many assume that developing a cool mind means becoming emotionless, passive, or detached from life's intensity. They worry that pursuing emotional sovereignty means losing their passion, dulling their edge, or worse, becoming complicit through inaction in the face of genuine injustice. This concern deserves direct address. A cool mind is not about suppressing strong emotions or avoiding powerful responses. It's about ensuring those responses arise from wisdom rather than wounding, from choice rather than compulsion. Consider a master musician who can play both the softest pianissimo and the most thunderous fortissimo with equal skill and intention. Their mastery isn't about restricting their range of expression. It's about expanding their capacity to produce exactly the quality of sound each moment in the music requires. They can whisper or roar, soothe or startle, all while maintaining complete control of their instrument. This is the essence of emotional sovereignty, not the elimination of strong responses, but the ability to engage life's full range with precision and purpose. The distinction between reactivity and conscious response becomes clear when we examine their origins and effects. Reactivity emerges from unconscious patterns, often rooted in past wounds or conditioned habits. It hijacks our system before we've had time to assess what's actually needed. While these reactions might sometimes accidentally match what's required, they're more often disproportionate, misdirected, or ultimately ineffective at addressing the real situation at hand. Conscious response, by contrast, arises from present moment awareness and alignment with our deepest values. It can be equally powerful, sometimes even more powerful, than reactivity, but it comes from a place of choice rather than compulsion. This sovereignty allows us to bring fierce protection when needed, passionate advocacy when called for, or quiet presence when most appropriate. The key lies not in the intensity of the response, but in its source and its suitability to the actual situation. There are absolutely times when strong, immediate responses are not only appropriate but necessary. When protecting yourself or others from harm, confronting genuine injustice, or expressing authentic passion. The cool mind doesn't eliminate these responses. It ensures they emerge from wisdom rather than wounding. This distinction transforms how we engage with injustice and suffering, not by becoming passive observers, but by becoming more effective agents of change. Consider the difference between reactive anger and conscious fierce compassion in confronting injustice. Reactive anger often burns us out, alienates potential allies, and can even inadvertently perpetuate the very dynamics we're trying to transform. Conscious fierce compassion, emerging from a cool mind, can be equally powerful but more sustainable and strategic. It allows us to maintain clarity about what's needed while accessing the full range of our resources and wisdom. The key to developing this capacity lies in understanding that emotional sovereignty actually expands, rather than limits our response repertoire. Instead of being locked into habitual reactions, whether those defaults tend toward aggression or avoidance, we gain access to the full spectrum of human expression. This expansion allows us to meet each situation with what it truly requires, rather than what our reactive patterns automatically generate. Response range development involves practicing both quiet presence and powerful engagement. learning to access different qualities of energy while maintaining inner clarity. This isn't about deciding in advance to always be calm or always be forceful. It's about developing the discernment to recognize what each unique situation actually calls for. The true power of a cool mind reveals itself precisely in those moments that seem to demand reactivity. Rather than becoming passive or detached, we become more capable of effective action because our responses emerge from clarity rather than confusion, from choice rather than conditioning. This sovereignty allows us to engage fully with life's intensity while maintaining access to our deepest wisdom. In developing emotional sovereignty, we're not transcending our humanity. We're fully embodying it. We're not rising above life's messiness. We're engaging it more completely, with greater awareness and effectiveness. The cool mind doesn't make us less passionate about what matters. It ensures our passion serves its intended purpose rather than being hijacked by unconscious patterns. True power lies not in reactivity, but in appropriate response. This fundamental truth transforms how we show up in the world. When we learn to engage life's full range with consciousness rather than compulsion, we discover that emotional sovereignty doesn't diminish our capacity for powerful engagement. It enhances it. This is the ultimate expression of the cool mind, not a retreat from life's intensity, but a more complete participation in it, guided by wisdom rather than wounding. Conclusion. The journey you've undertaken through these chapters isn't about reaching a destination where you never experience disturbance. It's about fundamentally transforming your relationship with life's provocations, understanding that while you can't control what happens to you, you possess extraordinary power over how you meet each moment. We began by examining the architecture of disturbance, those invisible reaction contracts you unknowingly signed, the personal geography of your trigger map, and the amplifying effects of your emotional echo chamber. Each of these revelations highlighted how your experience of disturbance relies on your unconscious participation. Through building your inner observatory, developing emotional spaciousness, and mastering response architecture, you've constructed new ways of meeting life's challenges with sovereignty rather than surrender. This isn't about becoming emotionless, quite the opposite. A cool mind allows you to feel more deeply because you're no longer afraid of being overwhelmed by your experiences. It's not about passivity. It's about choosing your responses with wisdom rather than having them chosen for you by conditioning. And it's certainly not about disconnection. When you're truly sovereign within yourself, you can connect more authentically with others because you're no longer using relationships to manage your internal state. True freedom isn't the absence of disturbance, but the presence of choice in how you meet each moment. It's standing in your inner observatory, watching the weather systems of experience move through your awareness, fully feeling their impact while remaining anchored in something deeper and more stable than any passing state. The tools and perspectives you've gained aren't meant to perfect you, but to empower you. They work not by eliminating challenges, but by transforming your relationship with them. Each provocation becomes an opportunity to practice sovereignty, to choose conscious response over automatic reaction, to extract wisdom from what once only created disturbance. Remember, nothing has the inherent power to disturb your peace without your participation. This truth doesn't blame you for your reactions, but reveals your power to transform them. As you move forward, you'll still encounter triggers, face difficulties, and experience the full spectrum of human emotion. But you'll meet these experiences from your inner observatory, able to witness them without being consumed by them, able to respond rather than react. able to grow rather than merely endure. This is your birthright, not a life without storms, but the capacity to stand at the center of any weather pattern while maintaining connection with the vast sky of awareness that holds it all. From this vantage point, life's provocations no longer diminish you. They reveal your depth, strengthen your wisdom, and illuminate the extraordinary freedom that comes from knowing who you truly are. Thank you for listening to my audiobook. You've taken the first step. Now go write your story, one action at a time. You've got this. You've taken the first step. Now go write your story, one action at a time. You've got this.